What do you got for me today, Timmy?
Well, let's tell people about our podcast, John.
All right. What's the title of that podcast again? I'm bald.
I'm blind, and we're
Still buddies. We're buddies.
Awesome.
We've been friends for 30 years.
30 years.
What do you have for me today, Timmy C? TGIF. It is September 27th.
It's a nice Friday here in the western branch of Bald, Blind, and Buddy Studios.
So that you're still in Iowa?
No, I'm in Wisconsin. That's the western branch.
I know, but how did you go to your high school reunion? I figured you were talking to me from the western branch. By that I meant... No,
I was back. I was back for my reunion.
Understood. Yeah. Okay, so you're considering me the East.
Yes.
I got you. Well, I have my own acronym, which is AC and BC, which is before COVID and after COVID. I don't judge anybody during the C part, meaning their behavior.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I lost my mind during COVID. Yeah, you and everyone else. So
I think you mean the before the COVID era, BCE.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. So
we have a first, John, here today on our podcast. We have our first guest.
Very cool.
Benjamin J. Siders, who is in Missouri, works as a lawyer, and I've known Ben for even longer than I've known you, John. And we're going to talk about AI and general implications and that sort of thing. So welcome on, Ben.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Welcome, Ben. Actually, we have to stipulate though that AI, because I live in Philadelphia, and if you say AI around here, and in fact there was a Super Bowl commercial about it, it can imply Allen Iverson was, one of the all-time greats for the 76ers, so they always talk about AI. And they actually had a Super Bowl commercial about it. I don't know if you folks remember that a couple years ago.
I do, actually.
Yeah. So I have to call that out for all of my Philadelphia brethren that are listening, all 12 of them, all of our listeners, Ben. So.
Yeah. And we have a lot of Romanian listeners, by the way. But that's a long story. So
very cool.
That may merit exploration at some point here.
At some point.
This reminds me of that scene in Home Alone when John Candy is driving Kevin McAllister's mother home, and he says we sold about 600 of those in, and she says Milwaukee. He says no, Sheboygan. We're very big in Sheboygan.
Very big in Sheboygan, yeah.
We're very big in Sheboygan. Yeah. So
we're big in Romania. So.
Yeah.
All right, so AI. So tell us, from the intellectual property side, the legal side, what should people know about AI that they don't, or what are your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, before you do that though, Ben, I'm sorry to jump in, but what kind of law do you practice? You don't have to tell us.
I'm an intellectual property lawyer. Yeah, so I do patents, trademarks, copyrights. I'm also a former software engineer, so I understand the software side probably better than the average attorney.
Yeah, so you know just enough to be dangerous, right?
That's right. I always say enough to get into trouble, often not enough to get back out, which is about how I describe my foreign language skills, too.
Fair enough. So tell us, you hold court here. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on AI, artificial.
Yeah, so, why don't we set the terms of the discussion? I think when we say AI, for the most part, people are talking about generative AI, the chat GPTs, image generators, all of these things that have emerged and become commercially available to people like us, people who are non-institutional consumers, finally available to us at a reasonable price or free for use to rapidly generate seemingly high quality written output, high quality images. Those of you who have explored AI probably know that getting that high quality output is not as easy as just typing in a 3-word prompt. You got to really understand how to do that. It's given rise to a whole new classification of jobs, prompt engineers. People who used to be programmers are now AI engineers, and their main job is to find ways to give prompts to the AI and explain to it what you want in a way that gets you the most high quality, useful output. If you don't know how to do that,
I've never heard of that.
No, it's a whole new thing. If you don't know how to do that, you get output that maybe seems like it's good, but you have to know what you're doing to be able to tell that it's actually not, which is dangerous. And we've already seen it hit the legal field. There was an attorney in, I think, New York who got sanctioned for having ChatGPT write a brief for him that he didn't actually cite check, and neither did anybody else. Well, I can tell you, having used ChatGPT before, it doesn't actually understand the law or really anything else. And what it gives you is what I call it simulated intelligence. Is probably a more accurate description than artificial. It's just predicting what a human response to the prompt might look like. It's not really thinking in the way that we would think of human cognition. And so, for legal cases, it knows what a legal decision looks like. It knows what a citation looks like because it's seen a million of them. But it doesn't understand the semantic meaning of any of it. So when you say, give me a case that says this, it might pick a case that's about that topic. But the more you ask it to do, the more likely you are for it to hallucinate and give you cases that don't exist or don't make sense or just don't stand for the proposition that you've asked. So in law especially, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know how to kind of spot check it and cite check it and make sure that it's not giving you nonsense back.
That's sort of how I've been thinking about it. Is my rule of thumb is only use it if you don't need to use it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it's kind of like the instruction manual for any IT system. If the manual only is helpful to you if you don't actually need it, right? Like it's like a reference. So yeah. I look at it, at least in legal practice, as more of a time-saving tool. The stuff that does the best is things like, I actually used it not too long ago to decline a meeting. Just somebody asked for a meeting to talk about settling a case. I wanted to respond in a way that was respectful, professional, firm. It's really good at saying, I want to write 3 sentences to decline a meeting to talk about something. I want to be firm, but respect, like you give it all the kind of the tone aspects you want. It's really good at generating something that really hits the tone you want. Then you can take that and modify it. But, we in law are especially hamstrung though, because you can't just put a bunch of information into the prompt. I can't give it privileged information without giving a client informed consent. Yeah. So, when you're just kind of sitting there thinking, I need to get something out of ChatGPT, well, you're not going to go call the client up and say, hey, do you mind if I do this? It's just, there's no time for that. So you got to kind of be careful how you use it, what information you give it. And that's why I find it's great for sort of little things like that where, you guys have both done a lot of writing, I'm sure, in college and your careers. Sometimes you can spend a lot of time trying to just get like a sentence right. And when you're billing by the hour, nobody wants to pay for that. So it's a great time saver that way.
So I guess this is sort of philosophical. At least up until this point, a well-informed and trained human brain has been the benchmark for knowledge and understanding. With this sort of thing, it seems like it could see connections and make things beyond the output of a human brain. How do we know if it's hallucinating, or what's the role there? Because it just seems concerning to me.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think that's where you have to have actual humans who know what they're doing to look at it. Like, and that aspect of these AIs isn't new. I've been doing patent law since 2010, 2011, and back then, machine learning was the big thing. Everybody had some new SaaS system or some new software program that was going to use machine learning to train itself. Crowdsourcing data was a big deal, and we were going to use all of these statistics and math to identify patterns, refine the predictions that it does. We've had that for a long time. What ChatGPT does is slap a front engine or like a front end onto it that explains things in well-written, plain English prose. And if anything, it's perhaps an indictment of us as a society that it doesn't matter if what you say is complete nonsense and wrong. As long as you say it in good grammar, people believe it.
Yeah.
Well, to that end, by the way, Ben, when I used to play Trivial Pursuit, if you didn't know the answer, you just say your answer with conviction, and then when they say no, that's incorrect, you go, oh, that's right. You just say it with conviction. But
that's how I play Jeopardy.
Yeah. Let me ask a question. Seriously, can you differentiate? Because a lot of times, and I used to work in finance for a couple of years when I got out of graduate school, and about 18 months in, when I woke up one day and realized I'd rather go back to bed for the remainder of the day than go to work, that's when I knew I had to leave. But a lot of terms are thrown around. And finance the same thing, and everybody assumes that everybody knows what you're talking about. Explain to the listeners, what is machine learning versus artificial intelligence? What is crowdsourcing? Just give us kind of the lay of the land as you understand it, if you would.
Yeah, so machine learning is all this stuff basically boils down to fancy math. So machine learning is the use of computer software to go through piles of data and look for patterns in that data. which computers are really good at, right? Big numbers, lots of information, that's stuff that people are bad at doing. We make mistakes, we overlook things, but the machine is really good at it, and it can find patterns in that data. What it doesn't know is what that means. And the example I often give is, let's say I want to, this is a dumb example, but I want to build an AI that can tell me if an image, like a photograph, does it contain a cat or not. Well, the computer has no idea what a cat is. It doesn't even know what the word cat means. It knows two things, 1 and 0. So I've got to give it pictures that do contain a cat. I've got to tell it this picture has a cat. And then I give it pictures that don't have a cat, and I tell it these don't have a cat. And then it will do all of the math. It's kind of a black box system, but it's a bunch of statistics and math to look at the data and figure out what are the patterns that are similar amongst those photos that do have a cat versus ones that don't. And then the resulting glob of data and statistics that it comes up with, that's what we call the AI model. That's what is kind of powering everything behind the scenes. So that's also called training, and the machine learning process is we can train it. That's called supervised training, where we are labeling the data for the machine so it knows what it is. And so then when it gets a new piece of data it's never seen before, it will look at that data, break it down into its constituent elements, and then compare it to that model. Does it look more like the images that have a cat in it, or does it look more like the images that don't? And when I say look like, I mean from a pure data perspective. It has no idea what the actual image is, what looks like to us as human beings. It just sees the 1s and 0s. And then it will give you a probability. It's an 80% match with the no cat pictures, and it's only a 4% match with the cat pictures. And what you get back is a classification. That one does not have a cat, and I'm 84% confident. So that's sort of your basic low-level machine learning that we've had for quite some time. And that is also a form of AI. When we say AI now, we're talking about, rather than the AI just classifying other data, it's actually generating new output. And that's what's different about this current generation of AI.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So rather than just learn, it's basically also offering responses. Is that a fair sort of summation for the
Yeah. So it has to break down your human input, which is written in natural language, understand what it means, look through its data, and figure out what to create that would look like it's responsive to that data. And it kind of does that in the same way autocorrect works, at least with written work. It kind of guesses what's the most likely first word a person would write in response to this prompt. And once it has that, what's the most likely second word? So if you've used ChatGPT, you see this play out in real time. It just kind of spits out one word at a time. And there's arguments to be made about whether, is that how people think? Like, do you really know where your sentence is going when you start writing it, or don't you?
Well, two things to that end. One is, I love the meme that's going around the internet that says, "Dear autocorrect, I will never mean to write the word ducking."
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It always corrects the F word to that. But I'm curious, from a legal standpoint, and somebody who taught constitutional law, I can understand how AI could be problematic, and I could certainly understand how that attorney in New York was sanctioned for behaving as such, because it is such a complex sort of profession based upon dense English language, old rule, antiquated notions, and so forth. But Tammy, to ask a question of you, from a medical standpoint, where I'm hearing that the future of AI is, at least the advertising is such, and I've seen it with some of the bigger pharmaceutical companies about the future of AI and diagnostic tools and medicine and so forth. Are you seeing that as well? Because this is kind of a question to both of you, and then I'll stop talking. I hear that all the time that AI is going to be the next big thing. But then I was just in North Carolina last week with my boss, and he said he wants to write a book about the disappointment of AI. I think two things can be true at the same time. Maybe the promise is a little bit overhyped in 2024, but I think in our lifetime we'll see what ultimately is being promised. Am I wrong there? And I'll leave that to both of you.
Well, I think machine learning especially has a lot of value. For example, there's data and studies that if you can train an AI to recognize a tumor before a human radiologist, like think of the lives that could be saved, or the morbidity, because of its ability to recognize patterns, I think there's a lot there. Whether it's genetic patterns of vulnerability to illness, or behavioral patterns. Somebody has a relapse if they hear the wrong song on the radio. Just based on what kind of grand global data there is, that we might not pick up as human beings. So I think those are all possible uses, but at the same time, I continue to worry about the hallucinations and that sort of thing. And the other thing I worry about is what using it does to us as thinking beings. If we can, people already offload knowing things to Google, right? They, like, young people will not learn things because they can just look them up. And I think I'm concerned about the effect access to large language models and stuff has on us just as thinking people, and that's a whole other question.
Yeah, nobody writes cursive anymore. Nobody
Yeah.
does math themselves. You can just ask Alexa.
In fairness, I never could write in cursive.
You didn't go to Catholic school? They teach
I did go to Catholic school. I still was no good at it. They begged me to type.
Well, one of my favorite sayings, and I think it's by Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal, is that with technology in the 1990s, we were promised colonies on Mars, and instead we got 140 characters.
Yeah.
Meaning, I think sometimes technology, and if you look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average of the most valuable companies on the stock market today, I think 5 of the top 6 are Alphabet, Google, Alphabet is Google, I should say, Amazon, and so forth. They're all based on premise, but the reality is such that, like, for instance, I'll use Alexa as an example. I think Alexa is very, very cool. And you know how it helps me when I'm making something and I ask how many cups are in this or how many milliliters are in this? What's the conversion rate? I haven't found it to be something that I could live without. And I'm wondering if that's what AI is ultimately going to become. What do you think, Ben, from your perspective as both an IP attorney and someone who, deals with this?
So I see 2 parts of this. One is the way that the law ultimately reacts and responds to AI, and what guardrails or regulations, if any, get put on. It's all couched now kind of in terms of copyrights and patents. But I get frustrated because I feel like that's a lazy out for the legislature to say we've already got a legal regime. They invented the printing press, and that was disruptive. So that same thought will work here too. Like, that's what we've been doing for 400 years. Mm-hmm. And it feels lazy and inappropriate to me. And I think it's really had a negative effect on like how our laws work around software and things like that. So I'm pretty sure we're going to wind up doing it again with AI. Maybe there's been some legislative proposals through, I think, Senator Tillis's office, to introduce some individual rights for people to control the use of their likeness, to deal with deep fakes and stuff like that, which is a whole separate category. So the legal regime is going to respond, and it typically responds in a way to preserve the sort of de facto status quo of the market, whatever it looks like at the time, for better or for worse. So there's that aspect. But whatever that is, that's what we're going to be stuck with. And I kind of share Tim's concern about the degree to which we offload the mental work we need to do each day. Some of that's fine, like driving to work and having the car keep my wheels between the lanes. That's a nice safety feature. But then when it's raining and that feature is gone, you kind of get out of practice. And I worry if in a situation like that, is it a net detriment? Right. And in terms of like living without it, if they shut it off tomorrow, I'd be fine. I've not developed like a dependency on it for my practice yet, but I do catch myself going to Chat GPT more and more each day to look things up. But honestly, part of that is because what I'm looking for from Chat GPT is not intelligence. I'm looking for somebody to sort through the first 900 hits of sponsored BS on Google and give me the actual information I'm looking for without having to watch a 9-minute video with a long introduction about like, rate, and subscribe for someone to tell me where to find a setting in my iPhone.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate watching YouTube videos when it's a quick answer and I just want words.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
I need 8 words
yeah.
usually, and yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is the promise, and I think the promise is there. I just think that oftentimes we have to reasonably set expectations. And one of the examples I
absolutely
is people talk about outsourcing, and I think it's all part and parcel of the same basic idea, which is technology makes it easier for us to do jobs that didn't exist or that are just better handled overseas at a less cost than would be here. It hasn't necessarily created new jobs. It's made the existing economy efficient. Amazon didn't reinvent the wheel, but rather it made, retailing and commerce itself move online away from the physical space. As a consequence of that, these major box retailers are now closing, but we as a society are better off for it. My frustration always in the political realm, and going back to your point, Ben, is, you have these politicians who are sitting in judgment and trying to craft appropriate laws. And I think most of these people are, still holding onto rotary phones. I mean, the average age in the Senate, I think, is something like 77 years old. And so I just wonder if part of the way in which technology, Facebook, for instance, gets away with so much is because people just foundationally don't understand what these guys are doing or what they're talking about. Is that a fair argument?
It's actually one of the reasons I went to law school in the first place. My consciousness here was formed a lot in the late '90s when Napster came out, and I saw the music industry lobbying Congress hard to effectively enshrine its distribution model in law. And while I certainly don't blame any interest group for advocating for itself, especially if it's a technological change that could put them out of business, but Congress should not kowtow to that, and thankfully they did not. And you can't fight technology, right? It's coming, and you can't get rid of it once it's here. But yeah, I went to law school because I was concerned that people were complaining about, oh, this music's being shared online. Okay, well, but we've had FTP for 20 years at that point. Okay, and Tim can probably attest to this. We used to download stuff back then too, before Napster came out. It just wasn't as easy. So this was also what my law school paper was about. Is that what's disruptive about technological change is often not so much qualitatively or even quantitatively what it does, but how easy and accessible it makes it to people who otherwise don't know what they're doing. And that's really, I think, what makes it dangerous, and also dangerous for Congress, who also doesn't really seem to know what they're doing a lot of the time, to get involved.
Discussion.
But for what it's worth, though, I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of our elected officials on legislative proposals. They do screen those in advance. They'll write up drafts, they'll send them around to key stakeholders, organizations of content providers, technology companies, IP lawyers, and they'll just ask, like, this is what we're thinking of. What's wrong with it? What's right with it? What are we not recognizing here? What are the unintended consequences? So I do think an IP in particular, where there's virtually no real political stakes in terms of like electoral politics, you get an unusual amount of genuine interest in getting the law right, because nobody's going to get up in their Senate reelection campaign and say, we passed the Marrakesh Treaty, which should be near and dear to Tim because it's an exception to copyright for the blind and people with other accessibility problems.
Yeah, to get accessible books and textbooks, it's great.
Yeah. Which to his credit, President Trump signed into law. When that was coming up, I thought, oh, here we go. He's going to somehow hold this hostage, but he didn't.
The thing, I've been reading a book on surveillance capitalism, and I think the other thing these groups tend to do is move in where their law is ambiguous or not clear and stake a claim, right? And they try to get there first before the democratic legislative process. For example, I've just been reading how Google Street View, they started sending cameras all over the U.S. and capturing video so that they could, monetize it before, people could actually get into the law. So I wonder if that's another way these things get pushed forward.
It's entirely possible. And really the IP laws right now are more concerned with, is it okay to, scrape basically the collective human consciousness as represented on the public web? Can you just scrape that and use it however you want without having to pay anything or license anything to the people who publish or own that content? And then on the flip side, the stuff that comes out of AI, who owns that, if anybody? Yeah. And on the first question, there's no answer yet. But on the second question, the Copyright Office and the courts so far have basically said that only humans under the Copyright Act can own copyright. So if something is computer generated, even in response to a human prompt, the resulting image or text is copyrighted by nobody. So it still scares the crap though out of photographers, right, who are already struggling, graphic artists, people like that. Who's going to pay them $1,000 to do their job if I can go to Midjourney and pay $75 a month and get all kinds of stuff out of that? Even if I don't own the copyright, do I really care about the copyright being infringed or not if I'm not paying that much for it?
Right.
Ben, one last question before we get into some further discussions about stuff. From your perspective, how do you feel about liability for these companies? That's kind of the ongoing, you want to hold somebody to account, and ultimately, should Twitter, should Google, should OpenAI be held responsible for the results that it produces if it ultimately produces something that, goes wrong, as it were, or leads to criminality? How do you feel about that? Should they be held liable from a legal standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think our existing body of law for products liability is probably where we should start and see if it works. I'm kind of a libertarian type when it comes to this stuff.
too.
If there's a problem and we need to regulate, we should absolutely regulate. But I don't like that we rush to regulate before seeing if the laws we have will work, and even if they don't, if the market will adapt and obviate the need to do so. Which so far, we did that with Napster at first. We let the private litigation process play out and largely dealt with it in the Copyright Act. Never really was changed to deal with online file sharing. So sometimes that works. I don't know if that will be the case here. So I think I'd like to wait and see, because products liability is strict liability. If something is negligently done, then you're responsible, regardless. So I think we let that play out, and if it's not good enough for some reason, we'll have to see. But I saw a great quote. It was on Reddit, I think, or Twitter or somewhere. But someone said they were like simulating a conversation, and they were like, AI companies, we've invented a virtual dumbass who's constantly wrong. Tech CEOs, great. Let's put it in every product.
One last question, and then we'll do some other discussions. From your perspective, we're in the silly season, 40-something days until the election. And Timmy and I had this discussion when it came to COVID about where is the appropriate boundary as it relates to free speech, and what is the liability that's assumed by the company that broadcasts it. Because there's old school sort of state laws and state laws, as it were, that dealt with freedom of the press. Unless you can show actual negligence and so forth, you can't be held liable. How do you feel about people intentionally lying during this election season? I'm not talking about Republicans. I'm not talking about Democrats. Should that type of information, and should the platform itself, whether they be OpenAI, Twitter, Google, what is the proper balance between the First Amendment, which I tend to be an absolutist about, versus incorrect information? And this was particularly germane, and why I was talking about it was Timmy and I had this discussion about COVID, and he said, look, in the next pandemic, which is inevitable, information should be out there, whether it's legitimate or otherwise. Government shouldn't be involved in trying to censor. How do you feel about that?
I think I'm on board. I also tend to be a First Amendment absolutist. I firmly believe in the principle that the solution to bad speech is not less speech, it's more. The problem is really that with the democratization of speech and the internet giving basically everybody out there a global platform, the downside to democratization is that you lose the curator who filters out the speech that's destructive and useless.
Right.
And although that was great for a long time, I kind of miss the curator now, because it's put all that work on me.
I knew this would get Timmy going too.
You have a curator who is actually invested in spreading the most malignant speech. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly. So
it's actually not just an absence of a curator; it's a malevolent curator who just wants clicks.
That's exactly right. And then, so I need
so that our listeners know, the more inflammatory the speech, the more explosive the speech, if you will, the more likely it's going to be rebroadcast, because Facebook is there to try and loop you in.
Yep.
Twitter, same thing. And so when Timmy and Ben are talking about a malevolent, curator, they're basically saying that the more outlandish the speech, the more likely it is to reappear. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not neutral players. They're trying to make profit, right? So
you need a meta curator, right? And then with the erosion of popular confidence and faith in traditional press to serve that role, we're kind of left in a no man's land where nobody knows what to believe. And I'm in the same boat. Like, I don't know what to read and what to believe. I kind of go to our traditional sources, the Times, the Journal, places that I think try still to get things right. But just from a legal perspective, I know they still don't. I see how they describe Supreme Court cases. I filed an amicus brief on a Supreme Court case back in December. I saw how the press described the ruling that came out, and they completely botched it. Even reputable, publications, and it's not because they're bad actors. The law is complicated, and trying to simplify complicated things for everyday people. I mean, you guys both know because you're specialists too. Simplify this for me is a nice way of saying make it wrong, right? Because I can't simplify it, right? It is what it is.
Yeah.
So we kind of need a meta curator to help us figure out which curators to trust, but nobody has the patience for that. And so the load of sorting the good data and the bad data and the good studies and the bad studies kind of falls to all of us, and nobody knows what to do. And so what do you rely upon? You rely upon people personally who you trust. But, I think we found out during the pandemic, when people get scared, otherwise rational people can engage in some irrational behavior.
Fox News, which is the number one cable news broadcaster to this day, just settled recently, and this, Ben, within the last 9 to 10 months, for nearly $1 billion for
Yeah.
defaming these sort of counters of these ballots. And the reason I'm concerned about that is I'm wondering what the proper balance is. And it's going to be particularly acute with AI, which can generate anything and is driving sort of, knowledge based upon malevolence, if you will, that I wonder if this is the right model to have. And you were saying we should, work within the existing confines of the law that we have. But I'm wondering if the existing confines of the law may be outdated and antiquated, and we might need to rewrite laws to address this. That's pretty.
And if we got there, I'd be fine with that. But I can tell you from dealing with IP disputes online, our laws end at our borders. And so these deep fakes that are going to come out to manipulate our elections are going to be hosted overseas. And even in Canada, I can't get Canadian companies to shut down infringing content or do anything.
Yep.
So
Yep.
It's not just a matter of Congress stepping up and saying, this is a problem, we need to deal with it. It's going to require a broader coalition, probably with some international cooperation. But I don't think we've hit that point yet where the political will to do that exists on even a national scale, much less a global one at this point. But there will always be some place you can put Pirate Bay, right? And the same thing is going to happen with these deep fakes. And right now maybe there's a power consumption and energy requirement that makes it expensive, but those things will get cheaper and they'll miniaturize. And so I'm very concerned about where this goes because like I said, I deal with a lot of these things online right now, and the trail often runs cold in India or Pakistan or China, and what do you do at that point?
Or Romania.
Right.
Or Romania, yeah.
Hey, don't go insulting our listeners. We still have one on the Isle of Man, right, Timmy?
They're here listening, so they can sample your voices and make a simulated podcast.
Yeah.
Now, listen, I have to go completely off the beaten path, and we'll do our ad read and our whack job on our hero. And I think we're going to outsource the hero, right, this week to you, Ben? Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But two things. Number one, Notre Dame against Louisville tomorrow. Please tell me we're going to win, because I can't handle Notre Dame losing, particularly this time of the year. So please tell me we're going to win, Tim. That's more directed towards you.
Well, I hope so. All chances are good.
I'm not asking for an AI probability reading, Timmy. I'm asking, do you think we're going to?
Sound like a fortune cookie answer.
I know.
Thank you very much.
I don't understand the problem well enough to give you an accurate forecast,
Fair
but I
enough.
hope so.
And another thing I just have to ask, because the mayor of the nation's largest city with a population approaching 9 million people, who happens to be a Democrat, was indicted yesterday, or 2 days ago, I should say.
Oh, yes.
And there is an accusation of lawfare, which is basically political opponents utilizing the levers of justice. And I'm wondering if this will temper that down, or it's just irrelevant. Because the contention amongst people that watch Fox News with regularity is, and again, I will be the first person to tell you that I think the New York case should have been brought last. I still think President Trump needs to answer for January 6th and further for the documents that he, illegally retained. To that end, there's always been an accusation that had he not been a Republican, they wouldn't have gone after him. Well, does this invalidate that argument based upon Eric Adams being a Democrat and the mayor of a city that is larger than all but 15 states? Or is it just we're so siloed at this point, you're going to get your information from Fox News if you want to hear it, or from MSNBC and CNN, respectively, if you want to hear it? Please tell me there's hope.
Boy. So I kind of agree with you. I thought the case brought against former President Trump in New York was not particularly compelling. Not that the legal theory was invalid. It just seemed like the kind of thing that I wouldn't normally expect.
Had he been Donald Smith, he would not have been indicted.
Yeah, but I felt the same way about Hunter Biden, right? If that wasn't his name, then his plea deal probably never gets unwound. So,
Right.
Celebrities get special treatment, both favorable and unfavorable, depending on the circumstances. I don't know enough about what the mayor of New York did to say what the difference is, other than to say that, district attorneys, they get elected and they make their careers on winning cases. So if they think it's a winning case, they're going to go for it. And I don't think political party usually stands in the way. With President Trump, I wouldn't say it's not. I'd say it's plausible, at least, that politics may have played a role. I doubt
it certainly
he gets
did in the New
indicted.
York case, right, Ben?
Yeah,
from a legal
but,
standpoint.
I
think the other two, we all watched on our televisions on January 6th. This gets me fired up, so Timmy's probably over there giggling. But there has to be an answer for that. And again, I always maintain that was an attempted coup d'etat, but he was not charged with such because, as the famous line in A Few Good Men says, it's not what I believe, it's what I can prove. And I think Jack Smith will be able to prove that he engaged in election subversion and tried to, interfere with an act of Congress and so forth. But he will never be able to prove seditious conspiracy, because then you run headlong into the First Amendment rights of the President of the United States. So, but I'm just curious if we can all sort of take a step back and say, you know what, they just indicted the governor of New York, who happens to be a Democrat, and basically, a leader of a huge city, the largest city in the country. Does that temper it down, or is it just a fool's errand to even try and do so?
Maybe it does. I live in Missouri. I can see Illinois from my office, and I think the last 3 Illinois governors are all in prison or were at some point. They're all Democrats. So I mean,
oh, that's funny. What do you think, Timmy? And then we'll do our ad read.
I think at one level, I think we have to treat each case as an independent case brought on its merits. I think as a civil society, you have to give that presumption at some level. Even if that isn't the case, but I could be naive.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that makes sense. I've heard that saying about free will before. Whether or not people have free will, you kind of have to live your life on the assumption that they do. Otherwise, what are we even doing here?
What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
The moral hazard of not doing that is overwhelming.
I'm with you. Well, Timmy, who's our ad read today?
Oh, here, let me play it. They sent us a commercial. Here we go.
It's a brand new game sweeping the nation. Word salad. The first to untangle quotes from today's politicians wins.
The concept of shaking hands is absolutely terrible. Huh? What's that supposed to mean?
Test your skill.
Who doesn't love a big yellow school bus? What the...
See the hilarity as you try to feast on a diet of word salad. New from Snarker Brothers.
Well, that's our new sponsor.
That's our new sponsor?
Yeah.
The word salad?
Word salad.
I like it.
Fun for the whole family.
And in line with your line of work, I remember there is actually and I forget which state it was when I used to teach state and local government, there is actually a law on the books, and I believe it was Oklahoma, but don't quote me on that. And unfortunately, if I'm wrong, all the Sooners are going to come yelling at me. But it basically said the door of the legislature shall remain open unless and when it is necessary for it to be closed. Talk about a word salad.
The irony is that legal language is the way it is to remove as much ambiguity and impart as much clarity as possible, which unfortunately makes it extremely verbose and dry.
That's that contradiction in terms, I suppose, huh?
Yes.
So, Ben, why don't you tell us about your hero of the week? You're our new addition.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. You're going to be a relatively frequent contributor, I think. So tell me about your hero this week.
Yeah, so my hero is a man named Raheem Cooper. He is from Georgia. He's a UPS driver. And recently he was on his route, and as he drove by through a neighborhood, he just saw a woman lying on the ground. Her front door was open, her car door was open. He saw some blood, and something was just off about the situation. So Raheem jumped out of the truck, ran up to her, and took care of her until she regained consciousness, called 911 emergency responders, got her to the hospital, got her taken care of. She'd had like a brain bleed or something, and was kind of touch and go there for a while. But it's just sort of the act of everyday heroism that good people do. Don't expect to be recognized for. You do it for a stranger because it's the right thing to do. And you got to Google this guy. He's this big guy with a big bushy beard. It just looks as sweet as the day is long. And apparently he is now
He
very much
regularly, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's a friend of the family now. Yeah, it's awesome.
I read that
That's
article.
cool.
That was out
That's
recently.
awesome.
That was a wonderful story, and he revisits her at the hospital with some regularity as well.
Yeah.
So I think that good people like that need to be celebrated. So that's an excellent hero.
Absolutely.
Now, Timmy, I have a whack job of the week, and the last name is Trump. But no, it's not Donald. Guess who it's going to be today? Melania. She went into her safe space known as Fox News. And, there have been speculative articles written about the relationship between she and the former president, whether or not they're truly in love. They have a son together. That's not for me to decide. I really don't care. But I will tell you that it turns out that, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when your last name is Trump. She may very well be as big a grifter as he is. She is selling a book now, right? Convenient around the holiday and election season because people are paying attention. That's number one. Number two, she gives an interview in which she says that the president, quote, may have sent out some mean tweets, but aside from that, everything else was great for America. That was number two. And number three, she suggested that the Democrats stop calling him a threat to democracy. And the reason that people think he's a threat to democracy is those around him, not his behavior. And I thought to myself, I don't know if she has a television, but perhaps she should turn it on and watch tape of January 6th. So she is my whack job of the week, and I am done making excuses for she. She has largely stayed out of the public eye the last 10 years of Donald Trump's public life. All power to her, but it turns out that she may very well be as big a grifter as he is, and in many ways, by justifying his behavior, I find her to be worse. So that, to me, is the whack job of the week. What say you, Ben? What do you think of that?
I hadn't followed that story. I was preoccupied by Trump's $100,000 wristwatch.
He's a huckster, and so is she.
Time for change?
Yeah.
Is it time? The time for change?
$100,000 watch. That's usually what you want. Steadfast leadership in a time of crisis. And oh, by the way, buy a watch from me. Yeah.
Let me give you guys one thing on Notre Dame. I actually have built a mathematical/statistical model for college football. And my model has Notre Dame
so you could be a bigger dork, but not much. Is that what you're telling us?
I don't get to program anymore because I'm a lawyer. So everyone. So anyway, I've got Notre Dame favored by 4.7 points. So I got a predicted final score of 27 to 22 or 23, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Chance of victory 57.6%.
I like it.
You heard it here, folks.
You heard it here, folks. Yep. Cash out your mortgage, cash out your 401k, and go to Vegas and put the money.
But I also had Notre Dame favored by 32 over Northern Illinois. So.
You had to kick me while I'm down, didn't you? Well, Ben, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us. We're going to have some more guests coming out.
That was a blast.
Tease one. We actually have a Notre Dame alumni likely to join us, a pretty famous one, right, Timmy? Sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yep, we're working on it.
Oh, what about trivia? We have a trivia question to answer.
Oh, that's right. Good call, Ben. So the question that was posited, and again, I will give you an opportunity to create a trivia question, and we'll give the answer next week. The question that was posited was, who is the second woman ever to serve on the United States Supreme Court? Ben, you want to take this one? Because you got Taft right.
I know the answer. I want to see if Tim's got it.
I was going to say Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
You would both be correct.
Yes.
Yep, that is correct.
Interestingly, of our last, I think, 6 appointments, 4 have been women. So there's been a swing in that direction.
Yeah, there have been. In honor of you joining us and being both a self-identified nerd, as you created that program to tell me that Notre Dame's going to win 27-23. You heard it here, folks. Put some money down. I have a question for you, and see if you can get this. Who was the longest serving Supreme Court justice? He served for over 35 years.
So we're going to save that for next week, or do we want me to try and spit it out
for next week?
We'll save it for next week.
Yeah.
All righty. All right.
So listen, Ben, it was a pleasure to have you and join us, and look forward to speaking with you down the line as well. And thank you for joining us today. So this is John Boland saying, hey, have a great weekend. Go Irish. And remember, misbehave, drive fast, take chances.
And this is Tim saying, if everybody likes what you're doing, you're probably not doing anything worthwhile. Take care out there.